Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you guys are all having a wonderful day today. I hope you're ready to get stuck into one of the craziest Mystery Mondays I've ever done, because this one is almost too crazy to be true. It's like something out of a book or a movie. I can't even believe this one is real. I know I say a lot of Mystery Mondays are crazy, but that's because they are. This one in particular is totally wild. Seriously, you guys are gonna be shook. It is insane. It's like the craziest love triangle I've ever heard of. Before we get into the case, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor Casetify for making this video possible. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here that Casetify is my ride or die. Like, I don't use cases from anywhere else on my phone. They have so many different cases, something for every aesthetic, no matter what you're into, and you can personalize them too. You can add your initials, you can add your name, a monogram, and your favorite font, and you can also even add somebody else's name or initials if you want to give it to them as a little personalized gift. And on top of being really cute, they're also super protective. I mean, you wouldn't guess it from looking at them because most protective phone cases are so bloody bulky, but they have a protective lining called Chi-Tech, which actually protects the phone for drops of up to 9.8 feet, which is almost 3 meters. So they're perfect if you're clumsy like me and you drop your phone almost every single day, but you still want a cute phone case. And they're also wireless charging compatible, they're 5G compatible, they have an antimicrobial coating which kills 99% of bacteria, and the impact and ultra impact cases are also made from 65% recycled and plant-based material, and their packaging is also made from 100% recyclable materials. So it's all good stuff. Currently, I am using this really cute little heart case, which I'm obsessed with. And then one of my all-time favorites is this mirror case, because the mirror is actually insane. Like, if you wear this in a night out or a date night or whatever, you can just, fix your lipstick up in front of it, whatever you need to do. Check if you got a little something in there. I have this personalized monogram case, which is adorable. And I just love the pattern on this one. I cannot recommend Casetify enough. I am obsessed with them, and you can get 15% off your order if you go to casetify.com/Bella. So make sure you check that out. I will leave all of the information and the link below. And speaking of cases, let's go ahead and get into today's case. Okay, so this story starts in 2012 with a guy named David Cooper who goes by Dave. He is 35 years old and he was just this nice, normal dude. He had recently separated from his girlfriend named Amy. They had been together for 12 years. They had 2 children together. So he was on his own for the first time in a really long time, and he moved to Omaha in Nebraska after the split. To get a new start. He got a job at an auto repair shop there and got a small bachelor pad apartment for himself. And he was not ready to get into a relationship or anything, because obviously he'd just gotten out of a really long-term serious relationship, but he did kind of, want to meet new people, get back into the dating pool, a little bit of, you know what I mean? So he starts up an online dating profile, and one of the first women that he meets on there is a woman named Liz Goya, or her actual name is Shauna Elizabeth Goya, but she went by Liz. She was a single mom with 2 kids, and her kids were about the same age as Dave, so they definitely bonded over that and, being single parents. Liz had her own business called Liz's Housekeeping, and Dave was attracted to her right away. So they set up a date and they went and got coffee and, just chatted as you do. They had a lot of fun together. It went really well, but Dave was very upfront with her, and he told her he didn't want a commitment or anything. He just wanted to have a little fun. Like, he was always really upfront with all of the women he dated. He would always tell them, I'm not looking for anything serious, and if you're cool with that, we can start and sort of continue with the date. And Liz was cool with that. She wasn't looking for anything serious either. And so they dated for a couple of months, and they were actively seeing other people at the same time. Dave was getting around, just living his best single life, and it was very much like an on and off again sort of situation, hookup situation. So about 6 months later, he's working, and this woman brings in her Ford Explorer to the auto shop company that he's managing to get it, looked at or fixed or whatever. And immediately he's like, wow, she's really good looking. She's got a really good air about her, and apparently apparently when they looked at each other, Dave felt sparks, and her name was Cari Farver. She was 37 and she was a single mum to a 14-year-old son named Max. So I'll tell you a little bit about her. She was born on the 30th of November in 1974 to Mother Nancy and Father Dennis, and she grew up in a small town called Macedonia in Iowa. It's a really small town. It's got like a population of like less than 300 people. And Cari was really close with her mum. They spoke every day on the phone. Cari had a lot of friends. She was known to be this really vivacious woman. She had a beautiful smile, a great laugh, and people were just kind of drawn to her. She was really smart. Even back in high school, she was amazing with numbers and computers. And then when she was 22, she fell pregnant and the relationship with the father didn't work out. So she became a single mum and she decided she was going to raise this baby by herself and she was going to be the best mum that she could be. So Max, her son, was really the apple of her eye. He was just the forefront of everything that she did. But being a young single mum, I mean, being a mum alone is a lot, but being a young single mum, she was really overwhelmed and she became kind of depressed. And then she was also diagnosed in her 20s with bipolar disorder. And it was just very overwhelming for her. She went through a period where she didn't even get out of bed for over a week. She was just very scared about her diagnosis, but she was taking all of the steps she needed to take. She was on medication, she was seeing a therapist, and she was just kind of doing everything she could to keep on keeping on. There were a few times where she went off her medication because she complained to her mum that it just made her feel very numb and she didn't like that feeling. But by 2012, she was in a really good place. She landed a good job as a computer programmer at a big firm in Omaha. She was on good money. She was always talking about how life-changing this new job was for her and how she was going to be able to better provide for Max. And Max was also just about to start high school, and Cari was super excited about that and all of the classes he was taking and the sports he was playing, and she was always there to cheer him on all of the time. So when Cari took her car into Dave's auto shop, he didn't like get her number or anything, even though he's really attracted to her. But a little while after they met, he actually found her on an online dating site. So he asked her out. They went on their first date at an Applebee's. They hit it off and went really well. And so Dave asked Cari to come back to his place, and she did. And you know, they kissed a little bit. It started getting a little spicier. And just before they were about to do the deed, Cari stops him and she's like, "Look, before we do anything, I just want you to know that if we have sex, it's just sex. Like, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm not looking for a relationship." And Dave was like, "Woo! I hit the jackpot here." He's like, "You know, I've got this beautiful girl here who just wants to hook up with me, no strings attached." He felt like he had won the lottery. So later that night, after they hooked up, Dave was walking Cari out of his apartment building, and Liz was actually there because she had like left some stuff at Dave's house, and she didn't tell him she was coming or anything, but she just kind of showed up so that she could grab some of her stuff. And they kind of just passed by each other in the hallway, and that was it. Like, that was their whole meeting. They didn't even talk, they didn't say hi, they didn't introduce each other, they just like passed by each other. So over the next 2 weeks, Dave and Cari continued to see each other. They really liked each other. It was going really well. And then Cari got put on this really big project at her work. So she was working late almost every single night, and she worked about half an hour to an hour away from her work, or lived half an hour to an hour away. Whereas Dave just lived like half a mile from her work, like just around the corner. So he ended up saying to her, "Look, here's the key to my apartment. Feel free to stay there while your project's going on so you don't have to work really late and then drive an hour home every night. You can just crash at my place." So they'd been seeing each other for 2 weeks and she already had a key to his place. You know, he was obviously feeling really comfortable with her. Things were going really well, and they were both on the same page that it was just while her project was going on. You know, she wasn't going to move in or it wasn't getting serious or anything like that. It was just purely for convenience. So then on the 13th of November in 2012, Dave wakes up, he gives Cari a kiss, and he leaves for work at around 6:30 a.m. And then while he's at work at around mid-morning, he gets a text from Cari basically saying, "I think we should move in together." And Dave's like, "Hold up," you know, like he texts her back and he's like, "I thought we were on the same page, like we haven't known each other that long. I don't really want to do that." And then she texts back and she just like says really mean stuff to him. She's like, you're a horrible person. She's using a lot of profanity. She's like, I'm dating someone else. I never want to see you again. And Dave was so confused because in the space of a couple hours, this woman who was so kind and easygoing and chilled out just all of a sudden flicked a switch and turned into like a raging psycho. So he gets home later that night and Cari's gone, all of her stuff's gone, she's cleared out. He's like, you know, whatever, it is what it is. And then the next day his phone starts blowing up with texts from Cari basically just saying, I hate you, you're a horrible person, you ruined my life. And he was so confused because they had been dating for all of 2 weeks at this point. So he was just like, well, phew, dodged a bullet there. He just thought that maybe for the last 2 weeks she'd been putting on this really nice act, and then she just flicked a switch and was like, yeah, let's turn the crazy on. She got the key to his apartment and she was like, let's go. And I'm not one to call a woman crazy, but in this scenario, like, you guys buckle up. So at around the same time all of this is happening, Cari's son Max has been staying with her mother Nancy because obviously she's been staying at Dave's while this big work project's going on. And she texts her mum Nancy and she says, look, I've got a new job in Kansas, I'm moving there, I'm gonna start a new life. And Nancy's like, what the heck? So she goes and talks to Max and Max is like, yeah, well, she did get offered a job in Kansas, so maybe she's just decided to accept it. And Nancy's still a little confused, so she tries to call Cari to find out what's going on and Cari doesn't answer, and they talk on the phone every day. So Nancy was kind of like, okay, like, what's going on? She's thinking maybe she's like gone off her medication or something like that. And she's not like immediately concerned because Cari's half brother was getting married and Max was going to be an usher at the wedding, and Cari had promised Max that she was going to be there to pick him up from the wedding. So she thought, you know, when he gets married, she's got to come back from that, so I'll see her and I'll talk to her then. But then the wedding rolls around and Cari doesn't show up, she doesn't call, she doesn't text, and she's not answering her phone. And Nancy is really concerned by this because she's like, you know, Max is really upset because he doesn't know why his mother's just left him. She's not telling me what's going on. So she decided to contact the sheriff's department and report her missing. And the sheriff's department came out, spoke to Nancy, and Nancy did tell them that Cari does have bipolar disorder. And immediately the cops just kind of jumped on that. They were like, you know, she's a grown woman. She is still communicating with people via text, so she's probably just gone off her meds and she's having some sort of manic episode. And they didn't really take it seriously. They didn't really look into it or anything like that. And so her family just kind of felt like they were on their own. They were trying to text her still. They were trying to get her to come back home to Macedonia and come get Max and stuff like that. And over the next couple of weeks back in Iowa, Dave is still being continuously harassed every single day by Cari.
They were bad, and they were just all about how bad of a person I am.
She's going hard, right? She's calling him names, telling him how much of a horrible person he was. She was harassing him, stalking him. She was texting him like over 100 times a day. She was emailing him as well, like over 100 times a day. And he changed his number a bunch of times, but she just kept finding out his new numbers, kept texting him, kept harassing him, kept stalking him. And she would text him sometimes being like, I can see you, you're wearing a blue shirt, you've got your feet propped up and you're watching TV. And Dave would be like, what the hell? Like, all of these things are true. Obviously she can see me from somewhere. So he was feeling really unsafe. She would always text him things like, my favorite thing to do is just stand outside your window and stare at you. And she wasn't just harassing him, she was harassing people that he would speak to, like other women he would speak to. He was harassing Liz Goya because he was still, you know, kind of on and off seeing Liz Goya, if you remember, the first woman he met on the dating website. And they were really confused as to how she even started contacting Liz, because literally the only form of contact they had was passing each other in a hallway for 5 seconds. So Liz is like, how did she get my name? How did she get my number? Like, how is this woman contacting me? She would text Liz things saying like, you're a fat cow and why don't you do us all a favor and kill yourself? And, you know, just saying, if you put your hands on Dave, then I will personally come and I will find you and I will hurt you. And Liz obviously told Dave, and she's like, what the hell? Like, why is your ex going crazy on me? How did she even find out my details, and she was spamming Liz with texts and emails as well, and Dave obviously felt really bad for bringing this crazy psychotic woman into their lives. I mean, obviously it's not his fault, because how could he have known this was going to happen, but he just felt really bad because it wasn't just him being stalked and harassed, it was other people. He just felt really terrible, but it did bring him and Liz closer together, because Liz kind of just stuck through him by all of this, and she was like, you know, I know that your ex is going crazy on me, but I'm here for you and we can help each other and look out for each other. And then on the 23rd of November, so 10 days after all of this craziness started and Dave started getting harassed by Cari and all of that stuff, Liz gets home from work and finds that the inside of her garage has been vandalized. So someone has spray painted the words "whore from Dave" on the inside of her garage, and she calls the police. She's like, look, you know, this guy that I'm seeing, his ex-girlfriend, is crazy. She's been harassing me, and now somehow she's gotten into my garage to spray paint these words on the inside of my garage, and I want to file a report for harassment. And the police are like, okay, we'll look into this. So now Cari is being looked for in 2 different states for 2 different reasons. So back in Iowa, they're looking for her because her mother Nancy has reported her missing. And then in Nebraska, they're looking into her for harassment and stalking Dave and Liz and all of the people that Dave is seeing. And then one night in January, Dave gets home from work and there's this car in his parking lot, and it's actually Cari's Ford Explorer. Obviously he worked on the car, that's how they met, so he knows what the car looks like. And he takes a photo and he's, you know, freaked out because he's like, what if she's here? What if she's in my apartment? Or what if she's going to do something to me? So he takes a picture of the car and the number plate and he sends it off to police. Police come and they search around the car and around the apartment block for Cari, and she's nowhere to be found. So they take the car into evidence because obviously the stalking and harassment has gotten super out of hand by this point. So they take it into evidence, they search through it, and there's one fingerprint in the car, just one, on this little mint packet that was in there, and it's not a match to anyone. It's not a match to Cari or anybody that they have in their database. Months go by and the stalking of Dave and Liz is just getting worse and worse. They are getting thousands of texts and calls and emails every single day, and they actually nicknamed her Crazy Cari. So every time one of them would get a text, they'd be like, oh, Crazy Cari just sent me another text. Oh, I just got another email from Crazy Cari. She was saying all of these crazy things. She was saying things like, I hate you so much, I want to drive a knife through your heart. She would tell him to stop talking to Liz, that Liz was a worthless whore. Just charming. There would be times where Dave and Liz would be hanging out and both of their phones at the same time would just start blowing up. Like she was out the window watching them or something, knew they were together and was like, ha ha ha, here we go. And then she would just, you know, ruin their night by sending them these crazy, harassing, stalking texts. Like they'd be cuddling and she would send them texts being like, oh, you're cuddling, must be nice. And it was to a point where Dave was just kind of becoming numb to it. You know, he had been receiving these crazy, threatening, harassing messages for months now and nothing was being done about it. So he was just like, you know, this is just something I have to deal with. And then one day he gets this crazy email and there's a photo attached to it, and it looks like a photo of a woman who has been tied up in the trunk of a car. And the email says, I have Liz tied up in the trunk of the car and you need to call her right now and tell her you hate her, tell her she's a fat whore, otherwise I'm gonna kill her. So he calls Liz and he's like, you're not tied up in the back of a car right now, are you? And Liz is like, lol, no. And he's like, okay, because I just got this crazy email. And he wasn't even shocked by this point because, like I said, he'd just become so numb to it. And Cari actually also emailed him an obituary she had written for Liz, which basically said, I didn't know her very well, but she's a whore and a man stealer, and thank God she's gone. Meanwhile, back in Iowa, Cari's family have no idea that any of this is going on. All they know is that she's bailed on them, she's bailed on her son Max, she's still texting them occasionally, but she won't come and see them, she won't come and see Max, she won't call them back or anything like that. And they're obviously getting really worried by this point. It's been months now. At one point, Cari actually texted Max and she's like, we're gonna move you down to Kansas with me, you're gonna start coming to school here. And he was obviously really worried about his mum, and so was Cari's mother Nancy, so much so that she actually took over guardianship of Max while all of this was going on. And Cari was missing big family events. Like, she missed Christmas, she missed her own birthday, she missed Max's birthday, and she even missed her own father's funeral. And she texted her family and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry I missed the funeral. And Nancy was like, no, this has gone too far. Like, something is not right here. Something is going on here. So she texts Cari and she's like, look, the only way I'm gonna know this is you is if you call me. And Cari just replied to her and was really mean, and she was like, look, you're a horrible mum, you're not a good person, and you're being really controlling, you need to back off. At one point they had a little bit of hope because Cari texted her friend Amber and said that she'd made a really big mistake and she'd taken off for a while, but she wanted to come home, and Amber was like, okay, you know, let's get you home. But Cari would either flake, she wouldn't show up, she'd cancel last minute, like, she would just never show up, and she was just very clearly going through something big. And then about 5 months after Cari left, her mother Nancy gets a call from some man who says, I've got Cari here, she's at the Sienna Francis homeless shelter and she wants Nancy to come and pick her up. So Nancy calls the police and she, along with an officer, go down to the homeless shelter. The officer goes into the shelter while Nancy waits in the car, and the officer comes back out and tells Nancy that Cari isn't there. So this man, whoever called up Nancy, just kind of got her hopes up for no reason. At this point, Cari's son Max was also losing hope, so he messaged his mum and he said, hey, and Cari replied almost instantly and was like, hey little man, how you going? And Max replied and he asked her to answer 3 questions. So he asked her what their first boxer's name was, what his middle name was, and who his best friend was as a little kid. And she actually never replied to that message. Instead, she posted this big message on Facebook, which I'll read you. She said, I have answered enough questions to prove myself to everyone. I am done. You can either believe I am your daughter, mother, sister, and friend that you have known your whole life, or you can just leave me alone. I've proven myself over and over, and I'm done. I left on my own free will, and I am sick of everyone giving me a hard time for doing what I needed to do. I'm not missing, I just don't want to come home right now. I'm a grown woman, and if I feel like leaving home, I have the right. I asked my son, Max Maxwell James, to come with me, but you didn't want to. So when I am ready to come home, I will. I'm sorry for hurting everyone and just up and leaving. I know I have upset some of you, but I needed to do this for me. And her family basically were all like, what the hell is going on here? Like, something is not right. And then back in Nebraska, the craziest thing happens to Liz and Dave. So in August of 2013, so 9 months after all of this craziness started, Dave gets a call from Liz and she is freaking out because her house is on fire. Her house has been burned down, and Dave freaks out. He goes directly to her house and there's fire trucks everywhere, all up and down the street. And if you don't like hearing things about animals, then please just skip forward like 15 seconds. But luckily, Liz's children were not in their house, but unfortunately a lot of her belongings were ruined. Her 2 dogs, her cat, and her snake all died in the fire.
From what I've seen so far looking inside, it's pretty obvious this is an intentionally set fire.
The guy that I'm seeing, he has a girlfriend that he dated for 2 weeks, and she's been stalking me since November.
Do you know her name?
It's Cari, C-A-R-I. She has made threats towards me and my kids. She would text me telling me she wanted to kill me and my kids. You would think they were married as much as she's stalking me. She won't leave me alone. She will not go away. I just wish she would go away.
It's honestly so incredibly sad that this happened. These poor animals were brought into all of this, and Dave just felt terrible because he felt like he was responsible because he had brought this crazy person into their lives. Even though, you know, it's obviously not his fault. He could not have known this was going to happen. And then about 2 months after that happened, Dave's auto shop was also vandalized. In fluoro orange spray paint, they had written "Dave beats women" on the outside of his store, and you know, Dave was obviously mortified because this is his job. It's also on a main road and people are seeing this. I mean, Dave basically became a nervous wreck while all of this was going on because he had been dealing with this crazy woman he had known for 2 weeks, stalking and harassing him and burning his girlfriend's house down and vandalizing his store that he worked at for almost a year now. So he actually went out and bought a gun just in case things ever escalated, in case she ever broke into the apartment, because obviously she was threatening him and threatening Liz, and he was just always on edge, wondering when things were going to escalate. On the 23rd of November in 2013, so on the 1-year anniversary of everything, you know, kind of going down and all of this craziness starting, Dave got an email from Cari that was titled "To My Husband," and she basically said, you know, I've been creeping around your building, and she also attached a photo of a knife to that email. And like I mentioned, Cari wasn't just harassing Dave and Liz either. Like, while Dave and Liz had been brought closer while all of this was going on, it was kind of bonding them, they still weren't in a serious relationship. They were still actively seeing other people, and new people that Dave would meet, Cari would message them and she would start threatening them as well and sending them horrible messages. There was this one woman, for example, that Dave spoke to. They hadn't even met in person. They had spoken on Facebook for all of 5 minutes, and Cari found out and she started messaging this woman, threatening to kill her and her kids. She was also messaging Amy, if you remember. It's Dave's ex who he dated for 12 years. They had 2 children together, and Cari was messaging her and calling her Dave's whore and all of these other horrible names, and Dave was just feeling so bad, and he was scared because he's like, you know, all of these people are going to be mad at me because I brought this crazy woman into our lives. It was just a huge mental strain on everyone involved. In January of 2014, Dave's friend Heather drove from Sioux Falls to Omaha to visit him.
I have known Dave since high school. Dave and I have just always had a special connection. We've always been more than friends. Within a couple of hours, his phone was going crazy.
Apparently, Cari saw her come in. I actually got a text to the effect of, "I see you in there with that whore."
And they'd been friends since high school, so they were just catching up and they were hanging out in his living room just chatting, and within a few hours Dave's phone starts blowing up with texts being like, "I can see you in there with this whore," and like all of this other crazy stuff. And then a couple hours after that, they're in bed, they're getting ready to go to sleep, and they hear this massive smashing sound, and they run out to see what it is, and a brick had actually been thrown through Dave's window.
And the next thing I hear sounded like a gunshot to me, which was actually a brick being thrown through the bathroom window. I was in a panic. I didn't know what was happening. Police, they came over and talked to Dave for a few minutes.
So they call the police immediately, and the police come, and he's like, "Look, it's my ex Cari. Like, she has been harassing me for, you know, over a year now at this point." And then after the police leave, he grabs Heather and they both go directly to Liz's house, because obviously Liz has been getting harassed this whole time as well. So he was just worried that maybe Cari had gone and done something to her, but Liz was okay, and she was very supportive. She was always there for Dave, and she was like, you know, we just need to look out for each other, watch each other's backs, because they had to. They didn't have anyone else. The police weren't really doing anything, and the case had kind of gone cold, and they had just kind of given up, and Dave had resigned himself to the fact that this was his life now. It was just something he had to deal with. But then about 2.5 years after all of this started, these 2 detectives back in Iowa pick up the case, and you guys are gonna be shook at what they found out. That's where I'm gonna leave part 1 for now. Sorry. So I'm going to be posting part 2 literally tomorrow morning, so don't stress. It'll be up very, very soon. If you guys want to know exactly what time it's going up, I will be doing a countdown on my Instagram stories if you want to check it out, or you can, you know, turn on the post notifications for my YouTube channel and be notified when it goes up. But it's crazy. You guys are not ready for it. You are not going to believe it. This is actually one of the wildest, craziest cases I've ever looked into. So stay tuned. And when it's up, I will be putting the link in the description down below as well. So see you tomorrow. Hopefully. Enjoy the rest of your day.